All right, guys, welcome back. We now have episode 4, and we're going to dive in some really great stuff in this episode. Before I get started, a little bit of housekeeping. I'm sorry it's been a little bit quiet this week. Honestly, this next week may be a little bit quiet too. I just got some work stuff going on and a lot on my plate right now that I have to get done, deadlines for. I would love for my TWD videos to be my whole job, but unfortunately, like everyone else, I got to keep the lights on too. So anyway, it's just been really busy the past week. And I'm working on the big long theory that I told you would be a few videos that I've been promising for several weeks now. The biggest thing is just taking screenshots, and that takes a little while to go through and get all the ones that I need. Once I have them all, then I'll be able to do it pretty quickly. So I'm hoping to get it done this week, but I'm not sure if it will post this week. It'll either be this week or next week. So I am working on it. Sorry, it's been a little quiet, but honestly, the last two episodes, the last couple of weeks have been a little quiet anyway because they were pretty chill, episodes. I mean, they were great, but not quite as much to talk about. I think we've got a little more to talk about in this episode. So anyway, all that said, I hope everyone is doing well, and let's just go ahead and dive into the episode. As always, there will be massive spoilers for Daryl Dixon episode 4. Let's see if I can say this. I looked up or I listened to the pronunciation, but it was a while ago. So La Justicia Fronteriza, I think, which just means frontier justice. All right, so we start with Daryl, and he is looking up at this bell tower and at the clock, which says 5:51 or 52, depending on how you look at it. So we got a 5 there. I want to say that at least in terms of the minute hand, that's really close to what time the clock read in Still, the grandfather clock. Because I remember it was about 7 minutes before, 7 or 8 minutes before the hour. And then remember, it does actually chime the hour when they walk past it again. So I'm not sure if that's supposed to be a parallel to the clock in Still, but I like to think that it is. And then he thinks back to this memory. We are just getting little tiny microdoses of this memory, but there is a dartboard which has a parallel to Still. We saw more than one bike in this episode, but all of this, it reminds me so much of the Moonshine Shack. And remember that he said his dad had a place just like that. So that makes sense. But also, I do think that they are trying to draw that parallel here. I hadn't really thought about it, but it's interesting that when they're doing this memory of him in his childhood, it's going to have a very heavy parallel with Still. That is specifically what they are calling back to, is a memory that was in the place that Daryl was reminded of when he was at the Moonshine Shack with Beth. And the other interesting thing about that is there's also a parallel to the theme because remember, I know you guys all remember, right? I'm preaching to the choir here, but at the Moonshine Shack, they were burning down their past, right? They were letting go of their past so that they could move forward and be happy. And they did for a very short time, for like one episode until Beth was taken. But this is what they're saying he has to do here too. He has to let his dead go, right? And we're getting a lot of hints to that theme in this episode. But anyway, we see a couple of bikes. We've got a red chair. We could find other parallels here, but you get the idea. There was this really interesting shot of a gorilla. I was thinking it was kind of black and white, but only kind of sort of. I'm not sure exactly what this represents. We also have a truck here that's red and green. This actually might be young Daryl. I can't tell if it looks like an arm to me, like it's a person standing there. So these may be his toys. And then we see him leaving the trailer and running away, and we hear someone hollering behind him, right? And that's it. So once again, we're getting very little in terms of the memories, and I want more. I'm sure you all feel the same way. Okay, so then we kind of get more into the meat of the episode. Roberto is basically pounding on Fede's door, asking for an explanation about Justina, tell me what happened. Justina would never volunteer. This jumped out at me as kind of an interesting line because I said before we didn't know exactly what had happened. It skipped over all of that. And it kind of made me wonder, well, did she volunteer then or was she taken? And if we're talking about a parallel to Beth, I hadn't even thought of that. I was kind of thinking that, you know, one thing led to another, and there was a lot more that went into it that made her decide to do that. It wasn't just that she walked over and went, "Hey, take me, I'll go." It was more complicated than that. But this makes me think this line, it might be a foreshadow. Maybe she really didn't volunteer and was just taken, and Fede is hiding that in some way. But I don't know. We don't know until we are finally told what happened, right? Much like the missing 17 days, we can't know for sure until they show us. Um, Fede is obviously upset that she left, so I don't think he I think he's telling the truth that he didn't want her to go and he was trying to protect her, but you do wonder if maybe this guilt that he's feeling is coming from him sort of caving in some respect, and maybe he did sacrifice her in some way. But his mother is trying to comfort him, saying, "You promised you'd look after her. You did." Um, then we have Daryl and Carol. Clearly, again, Carol wants to help and do something. Daryl doesn't. Um, so they're using some of Antonio's things, and he says if the weather holds up, he's hoping that they can leave in about a week. Um, so then we have this. Most of this goes back again to whatever happened between Fede and Antonio back in the day. Whatever their grudge is. She says, "Why don't you want them to be together?" And he says that Justina's a really nice girl and everything, but it's no good, the two of them together. And then he says he can't really even begin to explain. And she says, "You can just say it's complicated." I had some thoughts about this, about what it might be, and maybe I'll wait till a little bit later scene before I go into it. But remember that the showrunners did say it's a Romeo and Juliet story, which suggests that their families are feuding. And obviously, that is what we're seeing here between Antonio and Fede. They just don't like each other. And so it really could just be that there's so much bad blood that they just didn't really want, their kids to be together. But it seems like there's more than that going on to me. It's, if it was just that, they could say, all right, well, I'm never going to like my in-laws, but I guess as long as you're happy, But I don't know. I'm really interested to see what the explanation for this is because they're being pretty mysterious about it. Um, of course, Roberto is very depressed and he says he doesn't really want to go with Daryl now. Um, and then he says, I can't live without her. And Daryl just kind of looks at him. And I was really thinking that Daryl was going to say something like, well, you'd be surprised what you can live with, or something like that. But he doesn't say anything. He does the Daryl and just kind of is quiet and walks away. But this was just interesting. I mean, there's really no way that Daryl isn't thinking about Beth here. He, to be fair, may also be thinking about Isabel because that's more recent. But I don't think he got to the point where he felt like he couldn't live without Isabel. We have not seen him mourn for her in as um, deep or as like desperate a way as he did for Beth in season 5. Um, so they go to fix the boat. We've got more of Valentina helping them. I like her more and more. She and Carol become friends, which is fun. Melissa McBride during the episode Insider at the end said that she really liked their camaraderie and their friendship, and I did too. I thought they were fun together. This guy, uh, I'm blanking on his name, but it's going to say it later. I'm pretty sure I have a picture of it. He's teaching Daryl knots, right? And I remember when I first saw the scene, I was like, wow, that guy speaks excellent English. And we find out it's because he grew up in California. So he's not actually native to Spain. Um, Valentina is teaching Carol to use this. I assume it's a sundial of some kind. I do not know what the name of this little contraption is, but to figure out coordinates on the ocean so that she can basically steer the ship. So that's cool. They do get the rudder fixed and they're all happy about that. Then we see this part with Antonio and Roberto fixing the fence. I noticed he said the boars will keep breaking through it. It's another pig symbol, right? So that's why that caught my attention. Um, he talks about, and this is Antonio, the father, saying, to accept things you can't change. That's just part of life. And Roberto says, then why can't you accept Justina and me? And again, Antonio's being a little bit mysterious about this. He doesn't say why he can't. He doesn't say yes or no, but it's like there's something there hanging in the air that he's not saying. Then he says, you're too young to get serious. So this is a serious reference, which makes sense given that she was just taken away from him, right? The two lovers have been separated. But it's also, I mean, I think, yeah, he even says bullshit, which feels like a Beth thing. But it really is. I mean, there's no way they're too young to get serious. They're both of marriageable age. So, I mean, that does sound a little like something a parent says when they don't want to let their kid go. But It is. It's an excuse. That doesn't even make sense to say that they're too young. And then he brings up this feud between Antonio and Fede. And he says, for what? Some old grudge. Um, and again, Antonio doesn't really answer him, but Roberto gets after him and he says he doesn't want to get stuck in this village, like his father has, give up on everything, on ever being happy. And he says, Antonio says, our life is here until this ends. But this line and kind of the way he says it actually reminded me a lot of what Beth said to Dawn at Grady. You know, Dawn was saying that they just needed to hold on to like white knuckle it basically until they were rescued. And then Beth said, no, 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 you can't do that. This isn't over. This is your life right now until the end. So it's important how you act in the here and now. Like that whole conversation, it felt a lot like this. Like, and I don't mean to necessarily equate Antonio with Dawn. I think he's a much better person than Dawn was. But at the same time, he's almost like stuck in time in that he's not really moving forward. He's not really wanting his son to move forward. He has just been in this village for a long time and he did it, from a place of love to raise his son and to protect his son and everything. But he does feel like he's stuck and not moving forward. And he's saying that our life is here until this ends. And Roberto's going, no, that's not everything. That's not like the end all be all. So it just reminded me of some conversations that were had at Grady. And then Roberto says, if I could find a way to get to her, I would. Please don't do anything foolish, which, of course, in any TV show means that's exactly what he's about to do. We can count on that. All right, so then we go back to the beach and we have this conversation between Daryl and Carol. And this had a lot in it when it comes to what I was talking about, that theme, right? So she tells him she feels like it's her fault. She was trying to reassure Justina, but she put the idea in her head. And he says, no, stop, don't do that to yourself. And she says, don't say hot dogs. It's funny that the hot dogs are already an inside joke that wouldn't make sense if you haven't seen the rest of the series. But he's saying, we're finally going home. You got to let it go. She says, when I saw them in the creek, they looked so innocent and so in love. It was almost like a mirage. And I thought that was an interesting line because we've talked more than once about, especially during the Leah era, how it felt very ethereal and dreamlike. And, for a while, we even thought maybe it was a dream. Maybe he had hallucinated Leah. And, clearly because she returned later, that was not the case. But it's almost like there's this dreamlike quality around love because there's so little happiness in this world, of the apocalypse, that it's almost a theme for it to be something of a hallucination or something, and it's not literally that, but they're just like comparing it to that. So it was interesting that Carol said it was like a mirage. It's an endangered thing in this fucked up world. It made me kind of want to root for them. And he says, well, that was your first mistake. And she says, I don't think you believe that. And he goes, that shit that you're thinking is a mistake. It's the same mistake I made in France. So I guess what we're realizing here is that Daryl, in the wake of what happened with Isabel, has become very, very jaded about love. And it's, when I say that, it makes it sound like he's jilted or something. And it's not that. It's just that every time he tries and reaches out for companionship, something goes terribly, terribly wrong. I kind of don't blame him for feeling this way, but it's super sad. I mean, the first one was Beth, of course, and she died. At least he thinks she did. And then there was Leah, who ended up being a villain, and he ended up having to shoot her in the head. Like that, even though he was okay with it when that happened because she was trying to kill Maggie, that's still not a great way for a relationship to end, right? And then, you have Isabel, who again, this sounds somewhat gross, but he almost had to talk her into that relationship. And obviously it wasn't a gross thing, but it just took a while for her to come around to the idea of it, which is exactly why I didn't like it. I didn't feel like she was all that excited to be with him. Um, but then she died too. And so he's just become very jolted about the idea of love. And that's why we keep hearing him like tell Roberto, life's harder than that. And you're going to have to grow up and learn this stuff. You know what I mean? He's just become very, very jaded about it because this keeps happening to him. And Carol's going, no, I don't think you really believe that. And he probably doesn't, like on a real gut level or soul level, but this is where he is right now and why he's so unhappy is because this keeps happening. Same mistake we're always making. And she says it's not a mistake, which is, really he's talking about getting involved and fighting for people and helping people. And then he says we're always fighting everyone else's fights. Sometimes we have to fight for ourselves. And she says if anything's worth fighting for, isn't it two young people who just want to be together? And he gives her this really interesting look when she says that. And then she says, how can you not even care? And that kind of pisses him off. He says, what makes you think I don't care? And she says, well, stop acting like there's nothing we can do. So this part of the conversation actually is kind of a callback to uh, Beth and Daryl in Still when he was being very robotic, because he's kind of being that way now. He's being more talkative than he was in Still, but he's just very focused, like one track mind on getting home. Back in Still, it was more like very focused on just surviving, wake up, find food, go to sleep, wake up, find food, kill walkers. You know what I mean? He goes into this robotic mode where that's all he's doing. And he's kind of doing that now. And, um, Beth talks about how they should do something, not just be in that robotic mode. And that was really more about just the two of them and what they were doing on the road. But it's kind of similar. You can see that the dialogue is similar. And Carol's saying, we can, stop acting like there's nothing we can do. We can do something. So that is a callback to Beth's dialogue. And then Daryl says, nope, Justina's gone. There's nothing we can do about it. She ain't coming back. And then he says, hell, none of them are coming back. And then after this, he gets mad and throws down the crowbar and walks away. So what he has an emotional reaction to is very telling. I mean, theoretically, he may be talking about all of the girls who have been taken from this village when he says them, ain't none of them coming back. But that's not what he's really talking about. He's talking about the people that he's lost. None of them are coming back. And in some way, it may even be that he almost doesn't want to help Roberto with this, not only because of what he's saying to Carol about how they need to get home and stop, getting in the middle of other people's battles, but in a way, there's probably some part of him that thinks it isn't fair, because he can't get the people back that he loved. Why should Roberto get Justina back? So I think that's why he's having such a hard time with this. He's definitely been there where Roberto is, and it's still a raw wound for him. So we're seeing how jaded he is. And once again, the theme for this season is that he's got to let go of his dad, and he certainly hasn't done that, at least not to the point where he can move forward and be happy and more at peace the way Carol has become. Okay, did everybody catch this? I saw it and I was thinking, is that what I think it is? But I wasn't sure. And then WD Way texted me and asked me if I thought it was a heron. And I thought it was too, but I wasn't sure. So let me show you the reverse search that I did. Okay, so I did a Google image search trying to figure out what bird this was. And sure enough, it is a heron. So these are some of the images that came up. It's a white heron, also sometimes called an egret. An egret is a type of heron. It says not all herons are egrets, but all egrets are typically herons. So if you're not remembering what this is, remember that we saw a blue heron picture right behind Beth, just as she and Daryl came out of the dark part of the golf club. It's right when she says, we made it. We saw another one, the actually exact same picture behind Rick in season 8 when he finds Gracie as a baby. So we have long connected those two things, Beth and Rick, and the fact that we saw both of them near herons. And now we have a white heron. So I will put the link to this article. It's not terribly long in the show notes, but I was just randomly looking up things on herons and what they represent, right? And I mean, check this out, you guys. Some of this is kind of crazy. First of all, there is an Odyssey or Odysseus reference here. So if you've been keeping up on the Odyssey stuff, it's definitely part of the heron. It says that it was thought to have been sent by Athena or Aphrodite, the goddess of wisdom and love. Athena, for example, once sent a heron to Odysseus during the Odyssey as a sign that she was watching him. That's really interesting because we've thought for a long time, I know I've talked about this before, about people watching them. That somebody was watching Beth and Daryl, and that the smoke from the moonshine shack actually drew them. It caught the wrong person's attention, right? And that may have had to do with Beth being taken. And then we kind of know that because of Jadis, that the CRM was paying attention to Rick and Team Family in general, was at least tracking their movements a little bit, even if we didn't always see them. So there's always been this theme in The Walking Dead of being watched by some mysterious group. And so it's interesting that we're seeing this now, and that in the Odyssey, that's exactly what the heron represented. If you go down a little bit further, there's even, this one's kind of interesting, a race between the birds. You can read that. But look, wolves and herons are the subject of another Native American myth. The story goes that the blue heron helped two weasels cross a river because they had asked it nicely. Along comes a rude wolf demanding to be taken like the weasels across the river. The heron proceeded to fly the wolf halfway across the river and then dump the river, or the wolf, into the river to drown. So we even have the heron like defeating a wolf. And there's the wolves back in season 6. I'll get to that in a minute because I actually do think that it's a relevant topic here. But the point is, this is a big deal that there's a heron in this episode. Does it mean someone's watching them? Maybe. Is it a Beth symbol? Oh, yeah. And I want to do a little bit more of a deep dive into this because, at least in the past, the biggest I and I need to go back and rewatch part of season 8 to get my bearings around Rick and the Heron. That was during a sequence in All Out War that went for many episodes and had a lot of action in it. So it's one that people were a little bit bored with and had a little bit of trouble following, but I know there was a lot of symbolism and foreshadow in it. So I'm not remembering all of the details. I need to go back and rewatch it, and heaven only knows when I'm going to get around to that. So, but the point is, what I was starting to say is that the main link we had in terms of theories for why there was a heron near Beth and near Rick is because they both disappeared, right? It's part of their similar arc that Beth went missing. If she is in the CRM or some other big organization, okay, Rick went missing. He was presumed dead. He was inside the CRM. You see there's similarities, and we saw the same painting, the blue heron painting around them. I'm also wondering why, or what the symbolic difference is between the blue heron and the white heron, because they specifically put a white heron in this episode, not a blue heron. Beth does wear blue scrubs a lot while she's at Grady, so I've often thought that blue could be a color that represents imprisonment in the show, and the white heron would be different than that then, right? So maybe the first two were showing imprisonment, the white is showing freedom or some sort of transcendent. I don't know. I don't know. But it's super interesting. Okay, so we're probably gonna have more to say about this in coming weeks because um, me and all my fellow theorists are excited about this, and we're probably going to end up doing some research and some deep dives. But this is a really important one. Okay, so back to the show. We see the heron. Um, then we see Carol figuring stuff like this out. She and Valentina have a conversation about being alone versus having companionship. And Valentina says the lighthouse is the longest place she's ever lived, on land anyway, because she spent so much time at sea. And Carol says that sounds queasy. So they're just kind of having a conversation. I didn't read too much into this, but Valentina does seem to think that Carol and Daryl are a couple. We see Daryl kind of going off by himself a lot and being thoughtful about things. Okay, so then we're back to this guy. Oh, Trevor. I think his name is Trevor. I do notice that he uses the word rabbit when he's teaching Daryl to do the knots, which is not an uncommon way to teach knots. Even people teach their kids to tie their shoes that way sometimes, but the rabbit symbol is a big one. So I think that's very on the nose that they're finding ways to put that into the dialogue. Um, and I really like this guy. Like I was sad when they took him out. I was like, oh, I liked him. And he's very just very personable, and he's being really nice to Daryl and really encouraging, right? Now, this is a line that I didn't pick up the first time, but after Daryl does the knot, and he does it very well, the guy says, "Good job. Now you have to do it with your eyes closed." Um, in the opening credits, Daryl's eyes are closed, so I feel like they're trying to say something here. Uh, but I'm not sure yet what it means. So it's just like almost like they're being very on the nose about it. But what does it mean exactly that Daryl's eyes are closed? Again, it could just, like we said, he's so in his in his grief that not really seeing things for what they are, something like that. But this line also makes me think that something literal is going to happen in the show that has to do with closing his eyes, because this feels like a foreshadow too. So we'll see what it ends up being. And then he just kind of walks away without saying anything, and this guy's like, "Oh yeah, okay." Anyway, so Roberto's not coming. Cooper, that's his name, not Trevor. So Cooper grew up in California. She wants him to take Cooper. He basically says no, but Carol's trying to get him to let Cooper come. And she says, Cooper's really good. Carol asks Valentina to come, but she says, no, I'm good. But my point stands, take Cooper. And he says, no, we'll be fine. Anyway, on and on. Let me come back to Cooper. It's not too much further. There was more than one. I don't remember what the other one was, but I think more than once they mentioned bad luck. So it is part of the luck theme, but it's specifically actually bad luck in this case, not good luck. And then we have this. This was really funny, actually. And I think this is probably what the screeners and the people that did the reviews before the show started, I think this is probably what they were referring to when they said they make sure to let you know that Carol as a couple, Caryl, is not a thing. I think it's the scene that they're talking about, because she calls him Carol's boyfriend, and then Carol says, no, he's not. We're not. And she goes, you've never? And then Daryl goes, nope, which made me laugh. But they're very much friend zoning it here, right? So I don't think any of us have any problems with that. It was quite funny. All right, so then we go back to Antonio and Roberto, and Fede comes to see Roberto, and he says, my dad will be back soon. You can talk to him about my punishment. And he says, Roberto, there's no punishment. I just wanted to say how sorry I am that Justina has gone. And he says, yeah, but you never wanted us to be together. I made a promise to protect her. Then why didn't you stop her? And he says he tried. Again, we're not sure exactly what that means. In the context of what we know, it just sounds like she was determined to volunteer herself. But there could be a lot more to it than that we haven't heard yet. And then Roberto says, we made a vow to each other. Why would she break it? And I think Roberto's got a point. I mean, if they made a vow to each other, they were almost married. They were at least engaged, and so it does seem odd that she would just take off without telling him. So again, this is another reason that I think there's a lot more to it, and that Roberto is right. Like, he's got a point here, that there's something that is not being said that happened. Now, here's where we get something that's interesting. Fede looks over at Antonio, and then he says, we rarely get to know the deeper reasons why people make the choices they make. Even the ones we love keep secrets. And he looks at Antonio. So I'm just, it's a theory of mine. I'm wondering if the reason that Fede and Antonio hate each other is because they quarreled when they were younger over a woman. And I wonder if it has to do with Roberto's mother. Maybe it's a matter of they were both in love with her and they both wanted to marry her, and she chose Antonio. That's kind of what it's feeling like to me. I could be wrong, like I say, just a theory. And then we have that part where Antonio earlier was talking to Carol, and he said, the two of them together, it's just not good, but it's hard for me to explain why. I don't know why that is, but I'm wondering if they could be related somehow. It reminded me of a book I read a long time ago. It was I don't know if you guys remember those, and I have no idea who the authors were, but there were these people books. There was always people of the wolf, and they were like prehistoric American peoples, but they were all novels that were written. My sister used to like them, and I only read one or two of them, but excuse me, there was one I read that was really fascinating, and I'm going to give you spoilers for the end of it, although, like I said, I don't know what the title was exactly, and I don't know who the authors were, so it shouldn't matter too much. But it was two young lovers in the tribe who were in love, they were sleeping together, and then one of them is murdered, and the whole thing ends up being kind of a murder mystery to find out who killed. I want to say it was the woman that was killed. And what it ended up being is that they were actually related and they didn't know it. They were brother and sister. And it's because their parents had had an affair, and, the woman got pregnant, but then they stayed with their respective marital partners and never told anyone about the affair. So there was no way these two lovers could know that they were actually brother and sister. As far as they knew, they weren't. And the reason one of them was murdered is because in the tribe's religious beliefs, like the worst thing that they considered like their murder one. The worst thing you could possibly do was incest. And if something like that happens, there has to be a death to like cleanse the tribe and cleanse the act and all of that. So it was really interesting. I remember thinking that was an interesting premise for a book. Anyway, I'm not saying that Justina and Roberto are brother and sister by any means, but I'm wondering if there's something going on there. Like, and that's what Antonio's talking about, going, yeah, it's not a good idea if these two get together, and that's why everybody's trying so hard to keep them apart. Anyway, like I said, it's just me spitballing. I don't know if it's going to end up being anything like that, but once again, I'm really interested to find out exactly what the issue is here, because they're being so secretive about it. But that's kind of how my gears were turning when I was watching this scene. And then Fede even says, I'll leave you with your son. You have a lot to talk about. He's like suggesting that Antonio tell Roberto something, but as far as we can tell, Antonio really doesn't. Um, so then Cooper talks to Daryl. Then Valentina said, you guys want me to sail with you? And even that line cracks me up because after Daryl said no 5 times, Valentina still went and told Cooper that he said yes. Valentina is funny. Anyway, but Daryl doesn't actually say no to him here. He kind of comes around to it, and this guy's talking about going home, and he's been wanting to go home, and he says he's a banana slug. I even meant to look this up and I forgot, but I know there was a banana theme in season either 1 or 2 of Daryl Dixon in France. I remember us talking about bananas. So I need to look that up at what it was, but here it is again. And I remember that it was, I want to say it was kind of Beth coded or there was some sort of TD symbolism in it, but I honestly don't remember what it was. So if somebody wants to remind me, please do. And then, of course, oh, here we go. Maybe this is the other one I'm thinking of. I guess this isn't bad luck, but it's dumb luck. So we had the bad luck and then we have the dumb luck. So they're definitely using that as a theme. And then Daryl seems like he's coming around to it. Okay, well, if you think you can help us get there, then yeah. He asks how long it's going to take, and Cooper says 2 weeks, 3 maybe. That kind of harkens back to it's been 3 weeks since Atlanta, which is when the music box woke up, right? But then poor Cooper gets hit with the arrow and dies. As soon as he got hit, I was like, no, I liked him. I mean, I didn't really think he would end up going with them. I figured something would happen that would keep him from going, but I was still sad that he died. Now, notice in this shot that he is wearing yellow. So what I was going to say about Cooper is I do feel like he is a mini or micro Beth replay. Very small, like not even a whole episode. But he was someone that at first Daryl was very opposed to and then slowly came around. And like I said, he's just very friendly, very personable. He was being very encouraging to Daryl. He was an American who wanted to go home. He said he wanted to see if his mom was still alive. There was just a lot of parallels there. And then he dies. And Daryl is the one who goes and puts him down, which we'll see here in just a minute. So, yeah, R.I.P. Cooper. I liked you. You were nice. But these guys, which we later find out are the Primitivos, attack them. And I will say that this episode, this is where he reanimates and Daryl puts him down and Valentina is sad. So I will say that in this episode, it felt like a lot of stuff happened in a very short amount of time. I think it's just the way they did the episode. Like they showed them working on the boat in so many different ways that it felt like a lot of time had passed. And I almost felt like, oh, the episode should be almost over or something. And then we get this battle, and this battle goes on for a long time. Like it's not just a single battle scene, it keeps going. So I just felt like they managed to squeeze a lot into this episode. So we see Path, she's looking at a picture of her and Elena, and then she notices these guys coming. I will say I didn't take too many screenshots of the battle just because there's so much motion going on that you end up with really blurry screenshots, as you can see here. But Fede arms everybody. They hear the bells and say, what's that? I don't know. And Valentina tells them it's under attack. That's what that is. So they head back and try not to do anything stupid. Can't make any promises. Some of this dialogue's really fun. We get an I get it here. I get it. We're leaving. Okay. And then they see this contraption, which, from the preview, I figured it would be the catapult thing, but they don't know what it is. This did feel like a very medieval battle because you have them shooting between the turrets, here. So that's kind of fun, even though a lot of them are using guns, which are distinctly less medieval. But okay, look, guys, here's another bike. So I actually rewound and took the shot because if you go back and watch it, the battle's going on, right? We're seeing people shooting, we're seeing the Primitivos running up to the gate, and it stops and focuses on this bike. Okay. And I'm sure you're thinking, okay, what is the bike? I still don't think I've nailed down exactly what it is. It has something to do with escape. It has something to do with being besieged by enemies. So a long time ago, long time ago, probably back when season five was on, I saw a theory about how the bikes equal kidnapping because we often see them when a character is taken by somebody. I don't think it is specifically kidnapping, although that theory was definitely barking up the right tree. I think it really has more to do with like being surrounded or besieged by enemies or behind enemy lines in some way. Some other times that we've seen bikes, like the kidnapping thing, it was because when Glenn was kidnapped in season two by the Vatos gang, there were bikes involved there. The one that I always remember is when Rick successfully gets out of the Claimer house. You know, he goes into the bathroom, goes out the window. There's a bicycle that it focuses on. So he was actually getting out of there when he was surrounded, woke up surrounded by these bad guys. More recently, I want to say it was season nine, Judith took off. She left the walls of Alexandria, and Michonne had to go get her, focused on her bike there. And she was, when Michonne found her, she was kind of surrounded by walkers. So we often see this, and it really focused on it here. And we did see that bike in Daryl's flashback to his childhood as well. So we're seeing them a lot here. See, this is what more blurry pictures. Got the ones that I could. Um, this Jeep, I think this is the one that broke through the doors, right? So they closed the gates, but one of the Jeeps broke through. And then they come up into the streets. This felt almost very Lord of the Rings or something, like they were because they're going up the different levels, what it feels like of the Citadel. Anyway, but this is scary to have these guys chasing after you. They're scary looking. And then Daryl and Carol and Path and this guy whose name I'm blanking on right now come up behind and start fighting from behind, which is actually pretty effective. This poor guy, he lost, I assumed it was his son, but Pat says it was his nephew that he lost. Anyway, Antonio and Roberto are also fighting closer to their home. Path goes in and helps Roberto. We see Fede get stabbed in the shoulder with a spear. He's a tough bruiser, though. He just pulls it out and keeps going. It gets dark. Roberto wants to go check on Alba and Carmen. And oh, this was another part that made me chuckle a little bit. Carol runs out of ammo and she's got one of them running toward her. And Grandma saves the day with takes one of them out with her gun. I thought that was awesome and it made me laugh. And then this was actually kind of sweet because it was so very, just so very human. She's going, son, and he goes, Mom, I'm fine. Like he actually says that. No, are you hurt? You need to sit down. No, we got to keep fighting. I mean, it was just so very typical mother and son. I thought it was kind of adorable. Anyway, so Antonio and Daryl and Path head back in and they're realizing it's very quiet. Daryl says something isn't right. And Roberto sees the catapult being lit up and launched. Yeah, you gotta love the closed caption. Fireball whooshing. Thank you. Appreciate that. So yeah, then we get these crazy on fire walkers that show up and things get real dicey, you know? This was kind of interesting. I'm not sure what the point of this was. We see this truck coming in, this Jeep or whatever it is, and it's got the lights and it's got the antlers. I think it's different than the one that originally busted through the gates. So it feels like this is more people coming in, and we see people get out of this truck and, just go in and start fighting. And at first, when I was taking notes and I looked up and I saw this and I was like, I wonder if I just missed something. And I was thinking, this is important somehow. But we keep going through the battle, right? It doesn't show anything with that right away. Release the ballista, which I didn't know what that was, but it's this huge gun that they go and get. Oh, and this was funny. I think this is when she throws him. Yeah, Carol just throws Daryl a gun, and it's like a machine gun of some sort, and he just picks it up and knows exactly how to use it. So I was laughing about that. I was going, oh, of course he knows exactly how to use it. I would not, but I'm glad he does. This right here is the ballista, and this actually reminds me a little bit of, I don't remember what it was called, but there was a big medieval weapon during the Leah and the, oh, what are they called? The Reapers had, which was much bigger than this, but it kind of looks like that. It's just some sort of big old medieval gun, right? And meanwhile, Fede is using the mini gun sort of thing and all kinds of weapons. Here's Daryl shooting um, the machine gun, and up here is Fede and this guy, and so yeah, all kinds of weaponry going on. And they finally seem to take everybody out, but a lot of people have died. I must not have gotten a picture of it. There was a part where once they start using those big guns, it shows a bunch of the Primitivos get back into that truck and drive off, like back up. And so I was thinking at first maybe it was something extra where more people came in and took something and left. But then when I rewatched it, I don't see that necessarily. So I'm not sure what the point of showing us that truck was, unless it's to show that some of them got away. And I'm thinking that might be it. Some of them got away, meaning they didn't kill all of them, and there may still be some of them out there who could come back or who they could run in, have another run in with at some point. Now, I don't know exactly where they're going with these primitivos. It almost feels like a one and done thing, which, if what I just said is true, then I'm kind of contradicting myself there, right? I don't know if the point of having that truck be there is that there's going to be more of them or we're going to see them down the road. But this just feels a lot like the wolves from season 6. Everyone wanted them to be more of a villain than they were because they were interesting, right? And we wanted to know what their origin story was, and we never really got that. And this feels a lot like that. I'm not sure if we'll see them again or not, but I assumed from watching the trailer for this that this was something that Solaz deals with on the regular, that these were people that they would know who they were. And at this part that I'm getting to, Fede says that's not true. They've never faced these people before. These people just showed up and attacked them. So this is the first time they've ever seen these guys before. And that surprised me. I didn't think that that would be the case. So yeah, it just feels a lot like the wolves, like they were crazy and psychopathic and showed up and attacked everyone and everyone fought them and killed them. And that might be it. I mean, I don't know. So it's interesting, but I'm kind of sensing a parallel there. I actually really like this scene when you have all these ashes in the air. I think that looks really kind of cool and ethereal, but this is Antonio hugging Roberto and, people mourning the dead. Um, I think it's interesting that Fede asks Antonio to do this, clean up the remains of the burnt out and hollow ones, and we're gonna bring our dead to the cemetery. And he has Sergio, who's his right hand guy, help him. But it's interesting to me that he asked Antonio to do it, and I don't think he's like, I don't like you, so I'm making you doing this. It almost seems more like he really does trust Antonio, at least to the sense that he knows he can get this done. So it's interesting that even though there's a feud between them, he still asks Antonio for help in getting this stuff done. He says theirs will join the patrol, which I think means any of the dead they're going to put them out with the walkers to help guard the gates. Let that be a lesson to others. And then Roberto starts going off on, so this is what we give our girls away for. For this, they're supposed to keep us safe. And this is where Fede said this was unprecedented, but he goes with that this shows that the alliance is more important than ever because they had the weapons and that helped them to survive. And survived, is that what you call it? This is a version of you call this living, which is what Beth said to Edwards, right? So lots of dialogue callbacks in this, lots of interesting things. And then Daryl and Path were able to capture one of them, which is very similar again to the wolves because Morgan um, took creepy wolf dude. That's what I always called him, captive. How can you say this is working? So then they question this guy, and again, they just strike me as being very much like the wolves. Even this first thing Fede says about it being folklore. Remember that with the wolves, in 516, before we actually saw them attack Alexandria, Morgan ran into one of them, to creepy wolf dude, and a couple of others. But he was talking about Native American folklore and how the Native Americans believe that men came from wolves. So we just have references to that, right? He tells them what they're called. Where do you come from? And he says everywhere and nowhere. How many? Tens, hundreds, millions. So he's giving very vague, all over the place answers, refusing to answer. And Fede gets frustrated with him. He says, I don't serve you. Who do you serve? And he says, you serve, the king or the next king of Spain. We serve no one. So they are a very chaotic group, nomadic. And Carol says, why destroy them? What's the point? What do they want? And he says to burn it all down. So it feels very much like the wolves, right? And Zabel actually says something about them in the episode Insider afterward, but I'll get to that near the end. Then they say one of them's trying to escape. So Daryl goes down with, I believe this is Sergio, to stop him, but it turns out to be Roberto. So Sergio still wants to kill him, and there's something odd going on there because Daryl stops him, and Sergio's way mad that Daryl stopped him, like um, steam coming out of his ears, angry with Daryl. And so then he goes to talk to Fede, and Fede yells at him. And it's interesting because Sergio says, "I was just going to blow the tires," and Daryl calls him a liar. He could see that Fede was trying to kill Roberto. And then Fede gets mad at Daryl and says, "You're causing a problem." So there's something going on here. I mean, why? Well, I guess I know why. He kind of says why here. It seems odd to me that he would want to kill Roberto, that he wouldn't have a little more loyalty to him than that. But he says, "You're causing a problem." And he's actually talking to Antonio at this part. Antonio says, "It's not his fault." And he says, "You're right. It's your fault. It's your son's fault." And Carol says, "We'll go after him." And he says, "We need everyone to protect the village." And he says, "Unless he gets himself killed first, he could destroy the alliance." So again, there's just we don't know exactly everything that's going on, I don't think. I mean, I think that's the answer to why he probably wanted Sergio to kill Roberto. And maybe it's not so much that he wanted to kill Roberto. I mean, I don't think he has anything particularly against Roberto, but he would rather kill someone than let them go and put the alliance in jeopardy. For some reason, he is scared to death about not being in this alliance. And I'm not sure exactly why. I don't think we have all of the reasoning behind that. I mean, is it really just fear that without it they're all gonna die? Maybe, but also his niece Justina just recently left with that alliance, so that could be part of it too. So it's just kind of interesting to try and figure out people's intentions, but we don't have the whole picture yet. Um, and then yeah, here's more of this feud between them. They're about ready to kill each other at this point, but Carol says they're gonna bring him back, and then this is really ominous. After Antonio and Daryl and Carol all walk away, Sergio says to Fede, "We're going to have to do something." And it's like, okay, about what? And do what exactly? Does he mean go after Roberto? Does he mean, I don't know, let somebody in the alliance know? I don't know. But he says we're going to have to do something, and that doesn't sound good. um, Oh, this was interesting. I actually thought that this line was really powerful. So Antonio says, "You don't have to come with me. You don't have to do this." And she turns around and just says, "Your kid is missing." And I went, whoa, that's so Carol right there, missing children. So of course she jumps in to help. And just the fact that she turned around and said that, "Your kid is missing," kind of, it really landed with me. She says, "When it happens, having help is a good thing." He asks, "Do you have children?" And she says, "No, not anymore." Um, Ethanol reference. He's going to grab the ethanol, which I assume they're using as gasoline for the truck. So then we have Daryl and Carol. He's not happy, naturally. And he kind of challenges why she's wanting to do this. And she says, "Why are you Roberto's champion?" Um, and he just says he's old enough to make up his own mind. And then she says, "What if he dies?" And Daryl doesn't really have an answer for that. And so they're leaving. And it just kind of made me laugh. Daryl's like, "Ugh," but of course, if she's going, he's going. And then Carol kind of smiles here, like, ha ha ha. So again, it was kind of funny. So they go out looking, gets dark. Daryl in the black bandana. I've seen that before. Um, do you think he'll find Justina? And Antonio says he won't stop until he does. Now, then we have this scene, which was interesting, and this is Justina, and she's with um, the caravan or whatever. She goes over to this horse, and then we see somebody coming up behind her, and she looks really scared. So I'm assuming this is Roberto, and he actually goes and finds her and gets her. And then we kind of go back and forth between what's going on the outside there with Daryl and Carol and what's going on here in Solaz. And most of his people are saying that their prisoner, the Primitivo that they captured, needs to be killed. Firing squad him or hang him. And Fede doesn't want to kill him directly, but he says he's going to be punished in a way that, will make others afraid to come back here again. But it's not for us to determine his fate, it's up to God. Then we see um, Daryl stopping and he says there's tracks down both roads. And I'm not sure what the significance of this is because he can still tell which way Roberto went. He says, he went this way. So why are there tracks down both roads? The only thing I can think of is maybe Roberto went down one road and like maybe he went like say to the left in order to go find and pick up Justina and then he came back and went to the right because they're trying to get away. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly why they wanted to tell us that there are tracks down both roads. Um, it could be symbolic, obviously. I mean, if we're talking two roads, that reminds me of Diverged, and there's tracks down both roads. Both roads have been traveled in some capacity, but he does know which way Roberto is going. So anyway, I'm not sure. This was an interesting scene. I'm like, I'm not sure exactly what the purpose of that was, but it's interesting. Meanwhile, with this guy in Solaz, they just put him basically in a walker pit. This is what we call frontier justice. Your fate is up to God, and they open the doors. Oh, up to God and your own stamina. And I believe the walkers that come out are the other Primitivos. So it's like poetic justice because it's his own people that are turned into walkers that are attacking him. And yeah, from the sounds of it, he doesn't last very long. Okay, so then Daryl and Carol and Antonio come upon Roberto's Jeep and it is overturned. And it, clearly in a wreck of some kind. But he doesn't seem to be in there. So Antonio starts calling for him, and Daryl says, be quiet, there could be someone nearby. And Carol finds the compass necklace. And Daryl, you remember he saw Roberto give that to her. So he says that he gave that to her before we left. And she says, okay, so they're together. And we see these really quick flashbacks. I couldn't get one very well that showed Justina, but it looked like after the truck flipped, these guys came and dragged them both out. So, like, you can't see it very well, but this is Roberto and this is Justina, and they both got dragged away. And that's pretty much the end. So, uh, again, they're really skipping over things. I'm assuming we'll get more of a explanation for this in particular, but they went through this really fast and they skipped over it in the sense that they're only showing us really quick flashes of it, right? So I guess what we're meant to understand is that Roberto did go rescue Justina, and then probably the people from the caravan, that he took her from, came and found them and took her back, but took Roberto as well. And so now they just don't, Daryl and Carol and Antonio don't know where they are. And that's pretty much how it's ending. So just notice the parallel between this and Beth. Um, Justina was taken from Roberto. Beth was taken from Daryl on the road to Grady. Roberto went and got Justina. Daryl showed up at Grady to get Beth. They were together a very short time. And then she was gone again. And from the preview for next time, it does look like we're going to see something similar to that. So we're definitely still going with parallels here. The compass necklace, and again, the way that they're skipping over things feels intentional to me. We'll probably get more of an explanation, but they're not showing us the details of what happened. And the same is true of Beth and Coda and everything that went on there. So this is pretty much the end of the episode. I did take a few from the episode Insider to show you what Zabel said. He's talking about the Primitivos. We just wanted a group that was completely amoral, that had almost no intent except destruction. It's like a hopeless army. It's like a psycho criminal on the loose. We thought that would be really scary, and it would be true to an apocalypse, all of that. So I just thought that was their little discussion of these guys was interesting. They talked about how they actually did set them on fire using this really cold gel, so that nobody got hurt or anything. And anyway, if you can watch this, it shows them after each take, they have to go in with like fire extinguishers and put out the fires. And then I assume they put more gel on them for the next take and light them on fire again. So just kind of interesting to see how they made it. But this is what they're talking about, the gel, and it's freezing cold gel. But you can see they had, they looked like they were on fire anyway. And this was just a long and really difficult shoot that they did. It turned out really cool, I think. And this is my Heron stuff. So yeah, Anyway, that's pretty much it. Like I said, we will probably have more to say about this and just a lot of callbacks and a lot going on. And a really fun episode, very high action. Got the battle, got the stuff at the end with Roberto and Justina. And yeah, it was just a really fun one to watch. So I hope everyone enjoyed it. If you caught anything that I missed, feel free to send it in. I'd love to hear what everybody's opinions were of the episode. And yeah, I think that's about all I have. I will try to get at least one more video out this week, hopefully more. But like I said, it is going to be a busy week, so I can't make any promises. But either way, I will be around. And yeah, I'll just talk to you guys again soon. Bye.